My fiancé texted, "I found someone better. We're done." I replied, "As you wish." Then I froze his cards, canceled the wedding, and sent him a $115,000 invoice. 1 week later, his attorney was frantically calling mine. "My name is Sienna Marlowe. I'm 31 years old and I run a logistics consulting firm that helps manufacturers untangle supply chains, reduce shipping costs, and fix expensive problems no one else wants to touch. 6 years ago, though, I couldn't even afford a problem of my own. I started the company when I was 25, with a secondhand ThinkPad, 3 clients who paid late, and the constant fear that I was one bad month away from sleeping in my car. My original business plan had only 2 steps. Step 1, don't D. Step 2, maybe make a profit. For the first 2 years, I worked 80-hour weeks, ate enough instant noodles to permanently damage my relationship with sodium, and slept on my older sister Diana's couch because every dollar I earned went back into the company. Diana was 34, worked construction, and possessed absolutely no ability to soften an opinion. When I told her I was starting a consulting business, she stared at my cracked laptop and said, "So you're going to advise people on how to be broke? I know logistics. You currently transport ramen from the kitchen to my couch." Her criticism hurt because it was accurate. But Diana still let me stay. She packed lunches for me when I forgot to eat, drove me to meetings when my car refused to start, and never once asked when I planned to move out. About 2 years ago, everything finally changed. I landed contracts with 3 major regional manufacturers. Within 6 months, my income multiplied. Within a year, I had employees in office and the kind of bank balance that allowed me to order dinner without checking the price first. When I showed Diana my first truly large payment, she stared at the number for several seconds. "Well," she said, handing my phone back, "maybe you do know something." Then she pointed at me. "Don't become unbearable." Success gave me 3 things I had wanted for years. My own home, a golden retriever named Pickles, and the ability to finish restoring the 1967 Chevrolet Impala Diana and I had found rusting behind an abandoned workshop. The Impala became our weekend therapy. Diana handled the bodywork while I obsessed over engine specifications. We spent almost 4 years restoring it until the paint shone midnight blue and the rebuilt V8 growled like something waking from a long, angry sleep. Pickles usually sat nearby supervising us. He was sweet, loyal, and about as intelligent as a bag of wet towels. Once he got his head stuck in a cereal box and simply stood there waiting for death instead of backing out. The shelter had warned me he was special. They had not explained how special. I met Adrian Vance 6 years ago. He was 22 then, working as a receptionist at a painfully formal law firm. He wore cheap dress shirts, carried a notebook full of exhibition sketches, and could talk about Renaissance painters with an intensity most people reserved for religion. He wanted to become an art curator, not just work in a gallery. He wanted to design exhibitions, discover overlooked artists, and someday manage a major collection. I fell in love with the way his face changed when he talked about it. Back then, I was still eating noodles on Diana's couch, but Adrian never seemed embarrassed by me. He listened when I complained about clients. He brought me coffee during late nights. He treated my tiny company like it was already important. When I introduced him to Diana, she waited until he went to the bathroom before leaning toward me. "He's too handsome for you." "Thank you." "I'm serious. What's wrong with him?" Pickles trusted Adrian immediately because Adrian gave him half a sandwich within 10 minutes of meeting him. A year into our relationship, Adrian confessed that he was thinking of abandoning his dream. "I can't keep working full-time and studying at night," he said. "The unpaid internships are where the real connections happen, but I can't afford them." By then, my company was finally stable. So I made him an offer. "Quit the law firm," I said. "Finish your degree. Take the internships. Go to the conferences. Build the career you actually want." He stared at me. "You'd support me?" "I believe in you." His eyes filled with tears. That was the moment I thought we had become a team. But belief did not erase the habits I had learned in business. I documented investments. I tracked transfers. I protected myself from risks, even risks wearing a beautiful smile. For every major payment, Adrian signed a simple loan agreement. Tuition, housing, deposits, career courses, and professional expenses were listed clearly. The contract stated that repayment would become due if our relationship ended before marriage. He barely read them. "They're just formalities," he said, kissing my forehead. "We're going to be together forever." Some couples wrote love letters. I wrote enforceable contracts with 6% interest. The first person who objected was Adrian's best friend Russell. Russell was pursuing a graduate degree in cultural studies, lived in an apartment funded by his parents, and considered himself an expert on every relationship except his own. He disliked me immediately. At dinner, he would make comments about wealthy women buying obedience from men while ordering the most expensive meal on a menu I was paying for. When Diana met him, she listened quietly for 15 minutes before pulling me aside. That man has more warning signs than a collapsed bridge. Adrian always defended him. He's protective of me. He calls me controlling while using my streaming accounts. He's complicated. No, I said. He's unemployed with vocabulary. Adrian's older brother Mason was just as exhausting in a different way. Mason worked for a startup that sold luxury-scented candles and spoke as though he personally controlled the global economy. Once Adrian received his BMW, Mason asked whether I could help with his car payments too. "You're already paying for Adrian's," he said. "It wouldn't be that different. It would be completely different." Russell later called my refusal a financial power move. Despite them, Adrian and I became engaged after 5 years together. I proposed at a private gallery opening with a custom sapphire ring that cost $15,000. Adrian had once told me diamonds were predictable, so I spent months finding something that felt like him. When I slipped it onto his finger, he cried. So did I. Diana examined it afterward and whistled. $15,000 for one rock. It made him happy. At least you can repossess it when this ends badly. I told her she was horrible. She told me she was realistic. By then, Adrian's entire life had changed. His old studio apartment became humiliating, so I leased a downtown loft with exposed brick and floor-to-ceiling windows. The security deposit and first year's rent totaled $25,000. He signed the agreement. He said he couldn't arrive at gallery events by bus, so I co-signed a BMW X3 and covered $15 payments. He signed that agreement too. Then came the clothing allowance, graduate tuition, specialized courses, art conferences, boutique supplies, hotel stays, and networking trips. Every payment carried the same promise. We were building a future. That was what I told myself whenever the expenses increased. It was what I told myself when Adrian complained that the Impala occupied too much garage space. "You barely drive it," he said one afternoon. "You should sell it and buy something practical." Diana, who was standing beneath the open hood, slowly lifted her head. I laughed to break the tension. But something in Adrian's voice stayed with me. Not anger. Ownership. As though everything I had built was already available for him to rearrange. For 5.5 years, the arrangement appeared to work. Adrian earned his degree, gained experience, and moved closer to the career he had always wanted. I ignored Russell's influence. I ignored Mason's entitlement. I ignored how rarely Adrian said thank you anymore. Then our 6th anniversary arrived. I made reservations at a restaurant he had been trying to visit for months. I bought a sapphire bracelet to match his engagement ring, and left work early, imagining his expression when he opened it. At 4 p.m, I reached the loft. Adrian wasn't there. At 6, I poured myself a glass of water and waited. At 7, I called him once. No answer. At 7:30 p.m., my phone vibrated on the marble counter. The message was 6 years long and 3 sentences short. "I found someone better. We're done. I want nothing more to do with you. Don't contact me." I read it again. Then again. My hands became cold. The bracelet sat beside me in its velvet box, catching the city lights through the windows I had paid for. My first instinct was to call him and demand an explanation. Who was she? How long had it been happening? Had he been wearing my ring while telling another woman he loved her? But then, another part of my mind took control, the part trained to respond when a system failed, and millions of dollars depended on staying calm. His message was not ambiguous. He did not ask for time. He did not ask for space. He terminated the relationship. I typed 3 words. "As you wish." Then, I called Diana. "I need to stay with you tonight." Her voice changed immediately. "What happened?" I read her the message. For several seconds, she said nothing. Then she exhaled slowly. "After everything you did for him?" "Yes. Come over." I placed my phone on silent, opened my laptop, and logged into my banking portal. I was devastated. But devastation could wait. Adrian wanted nothing more to do with me. By midnight, I intended to make certain his wish came true. The first thing I did was remove Adrian from my credit cards. 2 clicks. That was all it took to turn the sleek black cards in his wallet into decorative pieces of plastic. He had been an authorized user on 2 accounts, both linked to my business banking profile. The moment I confirmed the removal, every future transaction under his name was blocked. No warning. No grace period. He had specifically told me not to contact him. I was simply respecting his boundaries. Next came the BMW. The monthly payment of $580 was due in 4 days. I canceled the automatic transfer and downloaded every document connected to the lease. My name was attached as co-signer, which meant the lender might eventually come after me if Adrian refused to pay. But that was a problem for later. For now, the vehicle was his responsibility. Then I opened the apartment lease. Adrian could never have qualified for the downtown loft on his own. His credit history was almost non-existent, so the lease was entirely in my name. I found the early termination clause. 60 days notice. 2 months rent as a penalty. Expensive, but manageable. I drafted the termination request, attached the required documents, and emailed the property management company before midnight. After that, I moved through his lifestyle, one subscription at a time. The premium gym, with the spa and smoothie bar, canceled. The meal delivery service that shipped him individually labeled organic dinners, canceled. The boutique grocery membership, canceled. The art supply subscription, canceled. Netflix, Hulu, Spotify, cloud storage, and the shared phone plan, gone. I changed every password he knew, then removed his devices from my accounts. It felt strange, watching 6 years of shared life disappear from a screen. A relationship could take years to build and minutes to dismantle. At 1:40 a.m., Diana placed a mug of tea beside my laptop. "You haven't cried yet," she said. "I'm busy." "That isn't an answer. If I stop, I'll think about it." She sat across from me. "Maybe you should." "Not tonight." Diana studied my face, then looked at the spreadsheet filling my screen. "What's next?" "The wedding." She closed her eyes. "Right. The ceremony was scheduled for October. The venue had been reserved. The caterer had received a deposit. The photographer, florist, string quartet, and event designer were all confirmed. Adrian had chosen almost everything. He wanted pale stone tables, imported flowers, and an installation inspired by a 19th century garden painting. I had spent months approving invoices for details I barely understood, because I believed the wedding mattered to him. I began calling vendors as soon as their offices opened. The venue kept $8,000. The caterer kept $4,500. The photographer and florist kept another $5,500 combined. By noon, I had lost nearly $18, 0 inches, non-refundable deposits. Diana listened as I ended the last call. "That hurts," she said. "Not as much as the divorce would have." She nodded slowly. "That's the first smart thing anyone has said about this." The engagement ring was more complicated. The custom sapphire ring had cost $15,000, and Adrian was still wearing it when he ended our engagement. I called my attorney, Philip Grant. Philip had handled my contracts since the first year of my company. He had the calm, exhausted voice of a man who had seen every possible version of human stupidity and billed by the hour for surviving it. "Engagement rings are conditional gifts in this state," he explained. "The marriage did not occur, so ownership reverts to the person who purchased it. Even if he refuses, then we file." I sent Adrian a formal demand for the ring's immediate return. His answer arrived 20 minutes later. "You gave it to me. It's mine. I'm not returning something that represents your commitment." I stared at the message. The irony was almost impressive. He wanted to keep the symbol of a commitment he had ended by text. Philip filed a civil action the next morning. Adrian tried to argue that the ring was an unconditional gift, but the proposal date, purchase records, and wedding plans made the purpose obvious. 2 weeks later, the judge ordered him to surrender it or face contempt proceedings. He returned it through his attorney. I sold it back to the jeweler for $12,000, a loss of $3,000. Still cheaper than letting Adrian carry my money into his new relationship. But the ring was only the beginning. That night, I opened the locked filing cabinet in my home office. Inside were 6 years of signed agreements. The apartment deposit, the first year's rent, the BMW expenses, graduate tuition, specialized courses, conference fees, professional travel, career-related clothing purchases. Every document included the amount, advanced, the repayment conditions, and 6% annual interest. Adrian had signed every page, sometimes with a heart beside his name. I organized the contracts chronologically and compared them against bank transfers, receipts, and account statements. The total principal was already enormous. After interest, the final balance was $115,000. Diana stood behind me when the number appeared on the spreadsheet. Is that real? Yes. You spent $115,000 on him. I invested it in what I thought was our future. She pulled out the chair beside me. No, Sienna. You financed his entire adulthood. The words landed harder than I expected. I drafted the collection letter carefully. It contained no insults, no accusation, no mention of infidelity, only dates, amounts, contractual terms, and consequences. Payment in full was required within 30 days. Failure to pay would result in formal collection proceedings, credit reporting, and possible wage garnishment once a judgment was entered. Philip reviewed it and made 2 minor changes. Then we sent it by certified mail. For 1 week, Adrian said nothing. I imagined him staying with the woman he had chosen, wearing expensive clothes I had funded, and telling himself he had escaped something oppressive. Then Friday afternoon, my phone erupted. What did you do to my cards? I'm standing at Nordstrom, and both cards were declined. Do you understand how humiliating that was? You can't cut me off without warning. We were engaged. I never said I stopped loving you. I just needed space. The messages arrived faster than I could read them. His version of events was already changing. 1 week earlier he had found someone better, and wanted nothing more to do with me. Now he had only needed space. Then came the accusation. What you're doing is financial abuse. A second message followed. Vanessa says you're probably breaking the law. She's helping me find an attorney. So, the mystery woman, finally, had a name. Vanessa. I did not respond. At 3:00 p.m., Diana called. Did he contact you? He discovered the cards don't work. He laughed once. I would have paid to see his face. Apparently, Vanessa is getting him a lawyer. Of course she is. Nothing says healthy new relationship like hiring legal counsel during the first week. By Monday, Adrian had called 17 times. I let every call go to voicemail. His messages moved through predictable stages. Anger, confusion, self-pity, then panic. I have commitments, Sienna. My internship coordinator wants to know why I missed a gallery meeting. How am I supposed to travel? Vanessa says you're doing this because your ego can't handle rejection. Mason says a real woman wouldn't abandon a man after supporting him for 6 years. That final message almost made me admire Mason's logic. Apparently paying for Adrian's life created a permanent responsibility to continue paying for it after he left me for someone else. Tuesday afternoon, the tracking system confirmed that the certified collection letter had been delivered. Wednesday morning, an unknown number called at 6:03 a.m. I answered without speaking. You psychopath? Adrian's voice cracked through the phone. $115,000. Are you insane? No. You expect me to pay all of that? You signed the agreements. They were formalities. They were contracts. I signed them because I trusted you. And I funded you because I trusted you. He went silent for half a second. Then he began shouting again. You knew I could never repay that amount. You told me we would be together. Forever. We were supposed to be. Until you found someone better. That isn't the point. It is exactly the point. He lowered his voice, suddenly attempting softness. Sienna, please. We can discuss this like adults. You told me not to contact you. I was emotional. You were specific. You're destroying my life. Over one message. No, Adrian. I'm ending my financial involvement because you ended our relationship. He called me cruel. I hung up and blocked the number. The next evening, my doorbell rang while Diana and I were reviewing documents. Pickles began barking from the hallway. Through the peephole, I saw Russell standing outside with a notebook in one hand and his phone in the other. Diana looked over my shoulder. Is that the graduate school philosopher? Yes. He brought notes. I opened the door but did not invite him inside. Russell lifted his chin and began reading. What you are doing to Adrian is textbook financial abuse and emotional coercion. Are you reading a prepared statement? This is serious. Then you should probably understand the facts. He ignored me. You used your superior income to make him dependent on you, and now you are punishing him for exercising his autonomy. I folded my arms. When your parents pay your rent, tuition, phone bill, and car insurance, is that also abuse? That is family support. And when I paid for Adrian's apartment, education, car, and career, that was different. Why? Because you expected something in return. Yes. Repayment under signed loan agreements. Russell's face reddened. Love is not transactional. You're right. Love isn't. Loans are. He slammed the notebook shut. You think contracts make this moral? No. They make it enforceable. He stepped closer. You're going to regret this. Diana appeared behind me. You should leave before the dog mistakes your notebook for food. Russell glanced at Pickles, who was wagging his tail and carrying a sock. This isn't over, he said. Then he stormed away. The following morning, Philip forwarded me an email from an attorney named Robert Bobby. The subject line read, "Urgent cease harassment of Mr. Adrian Vance." The letter accused me of predatory lending, coercion, and unlawful financial control. It demanded that I restore Adrian's access to my credit cards, resume payments on the BMW, and suspend all collection activity. Philip called me 5 minutes later. He wants you to restore Adrian's financial access. To my money? Yes. Is that a real legal request? No, it's a tantrum, with letterhead. Philip replied with copies of every agreement, every signature, and every bank transfer. His closing paragraph was simple. Adrian had accepted valid loans and received the full benefit of them. Unless his attorney could identify a legitimate contractual defect, collection would continue. That afternoon, Adrian's BMW was repossessed from the parking lot of a gallery. A former classmate later told me the entire event happened in front of several curators. Vanessa had reportedly tried to stop the tow truck driver by announcing that she was handling the financial situation. The driver told her to move away from the vehicle or he would call the police. Adrian was forced to take a rideshare home. 2 days later, the property manager approved the termination of the loft lease. Adrian had 30 days to leave. For the first time since receiving his breakup message, I allowed myself to sit in silence. The hurt was still there, but underneath it, something colder had taken shape. Adrian had thought he was leaving me while keeping the life I had built around him. He was beginning to understand that he had only been borrowing it. 30 days. That was how long Adrian had before he had to leave the loft. I assumed he would spend that month quietly packing his belongings and figuring out whatever glamorous future Vanessa had promised him. Instead, he chose chaos. Philip suggested that we schedule a supervised moving day. Get neutral movers, he said. No arguments about what belongs to whom. Everything documented. I hired one of the most reputable moving companies in the city. Every item Adrian had personally purchased was listed. Every item I owned was photographed. Nothing would be left to interpretation. The movers arrived at 10 sharp on Saturday morning. So did Adrian. Unfortunately, he didn't come alone. Vanessa stepped out of a white crossover SUV wearing oversized sunglasses, and the expression of someone convinced cameras should already be following her. Russell climbed out behind her, carrying a clipboard. Mason appeared a few seconds later with 2 of Adrian's friends. Diana looked through the window and sighed. They brought an audience. They brought a problem. Then I noticed the final surprise. Russell unfolded a poster board. Across the front, written in thick red letters, were the words, "Financial abuse is domestic abuse." He immediately started live streaming. "Good morning, everyone," he announced dramatically to his followers. "Today we're documenting economic violence against an innocent man whose controlling ex-fiancé is trying to destroy his future." Diana blinked twice. He made a sign. I noticed. He actually spent time making that. Pickles barked enthusiastically. He seemed convinced the poster was a toy. The lead mover, Billy, introduced himself and asked Philip for the inventory list. Billy looked exactly like someone who had spent 20 years lifting furniture and refusing to participate in other people's nonsense. Russell walked directly toward him. "Actually," Russell said confidently, "I'll be supervising what gets loaded." Billy didn't even look up. "Are you the property owner?" "No." "Attorney?" "No." "Professional mover?" "No." Billy finally met his eyes. "Then you supervise absolutely nothing." Diana smiled. "I already like him." Vanessa raised her phone. "We're recording everything." "So are the security cameras," Philip replied calmly. Adrian entered the apartment without looking at me. For a brief second, I almost recognized the man I had loved. Then he glanced at Vanessa before speaking, as though checking whether she approved of his performance. "I just want what's mine. You'll receive everything on the approved inventory." He laughed bitterly. "You really reduced 6 years together to paperwork. You ended 6 years together with a text. Silence. Even Russell stopped talking for a moment. Adrian looked away first. The movers began carrying out boxes. Everything proceeded smoothly until Adrian walked toward the custom walnut bookshelf in the living room. I picked this, he announced. Billy checked his clipboard. Not on your list. It was for my books. It was purchased by Miss Marlowe. I lived here. You also lived with electricity, Billy answered. That doesn't mean you own the power company. Diana coughed to hide a laugh. Russell immediately stepped between Billy and Adrian. This is exactly how financial control works. Billy folded his arms. No, this is how ownership works. Russell pointed his camera at Billy. You're participating in economic violence. Billy looked completely unimpressed. Sir, I move couches for a living. Vanessa joined in. Sienna bought everything because she wanted Adrian dependent. I looked directly at her. Interesting. What? How long have you two been together? She hesitated. A while. A week. Her expression changed. Adrian immediately interrupted. This isn't about Vanessa. No, I agreed. It's about contracts. Russell rolled his eyes dramatically. Contracts don't belong in relationships. They do, when one person finances another person's life. Adrian suddenly pointed toward the BMW keys, sitting inside a decorative bowl. The car should stay with me. Philip answered before I could. The lender repossessed it 3 days ago. Vanessa Frozi. You didn't tell me that. Adrian looked uncomfortable. I was going to. When? I've been busy. With what? He didn't answer. For the first time since arriving, Vanessa looked genuinely irritated. Russell quickly tried changing the subject. This apartment belongs to Adrian emotionally. The lease belongs to Sienna legally, Philip replied. The livestream chat was apparently becoming active because Russell's phone kept vibrating. He smiled confidently. People agree this is disgusting. Billy shrugged. My wife watches cooking videos. Good for her. She'd probably tell this guy to stop yelling and start packing. Adrian ignored everyone and walked into the bedroom. A minute later, he returned, dragging the custom oak desk I had purchased, specifically for his graduate work. This is mine. Billy checked again. Not on the inventory. I wrote my thesis here. You also drank coffee here. So? You don't own the coffee machine either. Diana quietly whispered. This man deserves a bonus. Adrian slammed both hands onto the desk. You're ruining my life. No, I answered calmly. You ruined your own life the moment you assumed my support would continue after you left. Russell practically shouted into his livestream. Listen to that. She's admitting she's punishing him financially. No. I turned toward the camera. I honored every contract exactly as written. Vanessa crossed her arms. You're obsessed with paperwork. I own a consulting company. What does that have to do with anything? It means I don't build 6-year financial partnerships without documentation. Russell scoffed. You investigated all of us too, didn't you? I looked at him. Yes. His confidence disappeared instantly. What? I researched Vanessa. Vanessa's face turned pale. You what? You publicly present yourself as a luxury real estate developer. I am. No. Silence. You're a mid-level real estate agent. Nobody moved. You lease your vehicle. Still silence. 3 of your credit cards are nearly maxed. Vanessa's jaw tightened. You can't know that. I know enough. Russell stepped forward. This is harassment. Everything I reviewed came from public records and commercially available reports. Vanessa looked at Adrian. You said she wouldn't do anything. You said this would all blow over. I thought it would. She stared at him for several long seconds. Then she quietly asked, You told me she was controlling. She is. She also paid for literally everything. He didn't answer. The live stream comments began moving so quickly that Russell couldn't keep up. Several viewers were apparently asking why Adrian had signed loan agreements if he believed none of this mattered. Russell abruptly ended the stream. That told me everything. The audience had stopped supporting the performance. Things became even worse an hour later. Billy discovered Adrian trying to load 2 designer armchairs through the back entrance, without authorization. Those weren't approved. I forgot. You forgot while carrying both at once. They were gifts. I shook my head. They were purchased for the apartment. Adrian lost control. He shoved one chair onto the sidewalk. You never loved me. The movers froze. Diana folded her arms. There it is. The real conversation. You loved owning me, Adrian shouted. I loved believing in you. You wanted me dependent. I wanted you successful. You kept score. No. I looked directly into his eyes. I kept records. For the first time all morning, Adrian looked genuinely shaken. He remembered every evening I had stayed up balancing spreadsheets while he laughed and called them unnecessary. Every signature. Every transfer. Every promise. He had assumed love erased paperwork. Business never had. Billy finished loading the final approved box. All personal property accounted for. Philip signed the release. The apartment was officially empty of Adrian's belongings. Vanessa walked toward the elevator without waiting for him. Russell followed unusually quiet. Mason lingered behind. Before leaving, he looked at me. You could still forgive the debt. I could. Will you? No. He nodded once. I figured. Then, he walked away. The elevator doors closed. The hallway became silent. I stood inside the apartment that had once represented our future. It suddenly felt enormous. Not because Adrian had left. Because I finally realized how much space I had spent 6 years filling with someone who never intended to stand on his own. 3 weeks later, the consequences began arriving faster than any collection letter ever could. Adrian's credit report now reflected the outstanding debt. Apartment applications were denied. Auto financing disappeared. Several gallery directors quietly stopped inviting him to networking events after learning about the public accusations and legal disputes. Meanwhile, Vanessa's carefully curated image also began to crack. The luxury lifestyle she advertised online was mostly borrowed. The confidence she projected depended on appearances. And appearances were becoming very expensive. Then, exactly 3 months after Adrian's text message, my doorbell rang again. When I looked through the peephole, my heart didn't race. It simply sank. Adrian stood outside alone. He looked 10 years older than the man who had walked out of my life. 3 months. That was all it took for the fantasy Adrian had chosen over us to collapse. I looked through the peephole. He stood outside my townhouse wearing the same wool coat I had bought him for our engagement photos, except now it hung loosely from his shoulders. His beard was uneven dark circles, framed his eyes, and the confidence that had once filled every room had disappeared. Pickles barked once before, wagging his tail. He still remembered Adrian. Dogs forgive far more easily than people should. Diana paused our game in the living room. Well, it's him. She grinned. Tell me you're recording this. I already am. The security cameras covering my front porch had begun recording the moment Adrian stepped onto the walkway. I unlocked the door, but kept the security chain fastened. What do you want? He swallowed. We need to talk. No. Please. You made it very clear you wanted nothing more to do with me. I know. So, why are you here? He looked down. I've lost everything. For a split second, I remembered the young man who used to stay awake with me eating takeout on the office floor while I prepared presentations for clients. Then I remembered the text. I found someone better. Whatever sympathy had started to rise, quietly disappeared. You should leave. Instead of walking away, Adrian pushed against the door. The security chain stopped him. Sienna, please. Isaiah. Diana. She walked over immediately. What? He's refusing to leave. She folded her arms. You've got exactly 30 seconds before this becomes a police problem. Adrian ignored her. I don't have anyone else. That sounds like your problem. No. He shook his head desperately. You don't understand. Then explain. He looked completely defeated. Vanessa left. Neither Diana nor I said anything. She left 2 weeks after we moved into her apartment. You mean the apartment she wasn't actually allowed to have another tenant in? His eyes widened. You knew. I know how to read lease agreements. He looked away. When the eviction notice came, she blamed you. She blamed me. What about Russell? He said he couldn't keep helping. Diana laughed. The activist disappeared when things became inconvenient. He stopped answering my calls. And Mason? He let me stay for a week. What happened after that? He told me I had to figure my own life out. Diana couldn't resist. So everyone who convinced you to leave Sienna suddenly vanished. Adrian didn't answer. Because there was nothing to say. The silence itself admitted everything. Finally he whispered, I'm living in my car. I looked at him for several seconds. Not with satisfaction. Not even with anger. Only disbelief. This was the man I had imagined growing old beside. The man whose dreams I had financed. The man I had trusted with my future. He looked like someone who no longer recognized himself. Sienna? What? I can't pay $115,000. I know. Then forgive it. No. His face crumpled. I work at a coffee shop now. I know. I make barely enough to survive. I know. I'll never repay you. That isn't my responsibility anymore. His breathing became uneven. I loved you. No. Yes. You loved what I provided. That isn't true. Really. I looked directly into his eyes. When was the last time you thanked me for anything? He opened his mouth. Nothing came out. When was the last time you asked how my business was doing? Still, nothing. When was the last time you spent your own money planning something for us? Silence. You remember every luxury I paid for. Another silence. But you can't remember the woman who paid for it. His shoulders collapsed. I made a mistake. Yes. I thought Vanessa was better. He shut his eyes. I was stupid. Yes. I believed everyone. Russell. He nodded. Mason. Another nod. They kept saying, you controlled me. And what do you think now? He slowly looked around my home. The framed certificates on the wall. The company awards. The photographs of Diana Pickles and me restoring the Impala. Everything I had built with my own hands. You weren't controlling me. No. You were giving me opportunities. Yes. I threw them away. Yes. Tears rolled down his face. I ruined my life. You did. I don't know how to fix it. You can't. He stared at me. What? You can't undo betrayal. You can forgive it. I already have. His eyebrows lifted. You have. Yes. I forgave you weeks ago. Then, forgiveness doesn't erase consequences. The words hit him harder than shouting ever could. I don't hate you anymore, Adrian. You don't. No. I simply don't trust you. He covered his face. I would do anything to go back. I wouldn't. His hands slowly fell. What? I liked who I was before you left. He looked confused. I spent 6 years, believing love meant sacrificing more every year. I smiled faintly. You taught me it doesn't. For several seconds neither of us spoke. Then Adrian quietly asked, is there really nothing left? I thought carefully before answering. No. He nodded. I guess I deserve that. You deserve exactly what your choices created. He took one slow step backward, then another. Halfway down the walkway he suddenly turned around. The Impala. What about it? I used to tell you to sell it. You did. You were right not to. Yes. A tiny, exhausted smile appeared on his face. You always loved that car. I always loved a lot of things. He lowered his head. This time, I chose the wrong one. He walked toward the street. I honestly believed that was the end. It wasn't. 20 minutes later, my phone rang. The local police department. Miss Marlowe. Yes. We've received a report from an individual claiming you've been financially abusing him. I almost laughed. I assume his name is Adrian Vance. Yes. My attorney has already provided your department with copies of every civil filing. One moment. The officer placed me on hold. Less than a minute later, he returned. Yes, ma'am. I see the documentation now. Is there anything else you need? No. But I'd recommend applying for a restraining order considering the repeated unwanted contact. I was planning to. The following morning, Philip met me at the courthouse. The hearing lasted less than 20 minutes. Security footage showed Adrian refusing to leave my property. The police call log confirmed the incident. The judge reviewed everything quietly before speaking. Miss Marlowe, your request is granted. Adrian was ordered to remain at least 100 yards away from me, my home, and my business. If he violated the order, he would be arrested. That chapter was officially over. 1 week later, Diana showed up, carrying 2 coffees and tossed me a familiar set of keys. Well, what? You finally free? I looked toward the garage. The midnight blue Impala waited beneath its cover, exactly where it belonged. I smiled. Yeah. Together, we uncovered it. The chrome reflected the afternoon sun. Pickles immediately jumped into the back seat like he'd been waiting for this exact moment. Diana climbed into the passenger seat. You know, she said, as I started the engine 6 months ago, this car was apparently too impractical. I laughed. Apparently, the V8 engine roared to life. As we drove through the city, warm air rushed through the open windows. For the first time in months, my chest felt light. No lawyers. No contracts. No betrayal. Only open roads. After several miles, Diana looked over at me. So, what? Any regrets? I glanced at the sapphire blue hood stretching out before us. Only one. What's that? I should have believed actions sooner than words. She nodded. Better late than never. Maybe she was right. Losing Adrian had cost me 6 years. But marrying him would have cost me the rest of my life.